Hello everybody, it's Mike here from Retro and Vintage Watches and Restorations. This video is about the disassembly of a Seiko 6309. Before we start, I'd just like to say that I'm no way a professional. In fact, I'm just a hobbyist who's taken a liking to taking movements apart and putting them back together. A few tips as well before we head on into the watch. Certainly if you're attempting this for your first time, is to make sure you have a good working area. I do this on my dining room table, but you want to make sure that you've got plenty of space around you, just in case any of these small parts decide to go on a little journey unexpectedly. You've got a good chance of finding them. If you're on a little tiny table in your living room and it falls onto your carpet, I can assure you it takes a long time to find that component again. Coupled with having lots of space, also having lots of good light. Either try and do it in the daylight or use some table lamps or something just to give yourself as much light as you can possibly get. I actually use a OptiVisor to keep both of my hands free, and that has a little LED torch on the top, which is very handy. It's not handy for this video because the camera is where my head should be, so if I am seen to be fumbling a little bit whilst taking some components out, you'll have to appreciate that's the reason why. Also, other things to say is take lots and lots and lots of photographs. Photographs are the most important thing here. It's how I started. For every piece you take off, take a photograph, and obviously by the time you've got to the end, you've got a reverse record of everything that you took off and where it was or how it was seated at the beginning. You often refer back to these. Even with a 6309 like this that I've done many a time, I still find myself looking back at old photographs. You never remember everything. So photographs are very, very, very important. Another thing again is to have your tools at hand. Hopefully you've got some good tweezers and screwdrivers. For the moment you're going to need a hand puller as well, and some Rodico, and then somewhere to put all your parts. So a compartmentalized tray, or some method of storing all the bits and pieces, especially if you're going to do this over a period of days. Okay, so with all the talking done, let's start with the watch. You've obviously been looking at this the whole time I've been talking away. This is a very damaged watch that I've got. The ironic thing is, give it a quick shake, it does run. A lot of cosmetic damage to the face. I've not looked inside the movement yet to see what's in store for us in there, but this is always a very good sign. Okay, so the first thing to do is to take it out of the case, and for that you need to take the case back off. Now I've loosened this a little bit. If you're doing it for the first time, you might need a case back tool. They're cheap enough to buy. Sometimes these are stuck on really, really tightly. Excuse me a minute. There. Okay, so to get the movement out of the case itself, you need to remove the crown, and if you've not done that before, I'll show you where you have to press on this movement. So if we just try and zoom in here a little bit, You can see the crown and you can see the stem, and there is this little button, for want of a better word, here. Now I've got my my spring bar tool that's just got a pointy end, and that's what I'll use to put into that hole. Depress, and then you want to pull the crown at the same time, and it's released. And of course put the crown somewhere nice and safe. While we're at this point, I will then remove the rotor. It always gets in the way. It's held in by a little screw at the top. There we are. And that's the rotor removed. Okay, so the next thing to do is we've got to remove the movement from the case itself. Now it's held in, some of them are held in by a movement ring. This has actually got a bit of plastic which clips onto the movement itself, so it holds it in the case. So the whole thing comes out together. Sometimes they're easy, sometimes they're not so easy. The thing is just to try and prise it up somewhere, obviously nowhere near the balance if you can help it. Let me zoom in a bit here. I like to just try and get my tweezers actually in where the, the hole where the crown was, and they tend to come out a little bit easier then, like so. There's the hole there. And then we'll turn it over. Okay, now I'm not wearing finger cups for this today. I guess if you were doing this for the first time and you haven't got the facilities to clean the watch, it's probably a good idea to wear them. As you can see, this is past its best, so it's given me a bit of license to use my fingers. The first thing we then need to do now it's out of the case is to remove the hands. Okay, to remove the hands, I would presume normally that the hands will be all over the place in different positions, not all together, but you'd want to try and put them all together. So you would put the crown back in its position. And then obviously turn to get them all to meet up. That's probably the closest I'm going to get because the watch wants to run on this one. And then to prevent the dial getting damaged, I use just a little bit of paper which I'll hook underneath the hands like so. Obviously I've done a better job, but I'm not worried about this dial. Hand pullers. So if you'd watched my tool video, hand pullers I use are just really cheap ones. The only different thing I've done, which is just for me, is I've highly polished the ends. It takes any sharp edges off, and it does help again to prevent any scratches. Okay, so all we're going to do to move the hands is we're going to put the puller over it, squeeze and pull up. Sometimes they all come off together, sometimes one by one, but there we are, the hands are off. Take the paper away, and of course store the hands somewhere safe. Okay, I'm going to turn it over. Now, I don't know what is the exact best or correct method. This is the method that I use. What I would normally do now is just remove the balance. The balance and especially the hairspring are the most important part in my eyes. They're easily damaged and not easily replaced. So certainly if you're trying this for the first time, it's best just to try and get this out of the way, then your fingers aren't going to catch it and you're going to know it's pretty safe. If it's running, it should be okay. Generally when you unscrew the screw, it tends to stop. Just be careful, that's all I will say. Take your time. Balance is held on by just this one screw. And the way I remove them, I get my tweezers and I go underneath. It's quite difficult with my camera in the way. Gently pick up like so, and then I'll turn it over. If it's turned over, it can go back into the dual setting where it's pretty safe. I actually use a little tiny bit of Rodico in my compartment, of which I'll sit this in on the Rodico like that and just press down so that again it's stuck fast. Okay. The next thing we've got to do is remove the dial. And the dial on these is held in by two dial screws. There's one there. Now what you do with this is you unwind them, but don't unwind them completely, just loosen them off. Incidentally, what they're doing is they're holding the feet in. So there's a foot, it's a little round post, and the screw just goes up against that and holds it in position. If you unscrew it too much and it comes out, it is a real pig to get the screw back into that position and screw it down. You almost need 3 hands. So hopefully you can see that. I've just loosened that one, and then we'll go and look for the other one, which is just over here, like so. Okay, and then you could prise the dial very gently. If you feel resistance, it's because you haven't undone the screw enough. The dial should come off quite freely and with its feet in place. Again, put the dial somewhere very safe. Dial is everything on a watch. Now, just for extra security, tighten these back up. You don't want one of those screws falling out. Okay, there we are. What I like here as well, which I didn't notice, is I've got the Roman numeral calendar, which is my personal favourite with Seiko, it has to be said. Okay, now we're just going to unclip this plastic ring that holds it into the case. These can be a bit fragile, certainly if you've got an old one it might be brittle. But it's very easy to come off because it's just clipped on. I don't know whether you can see that. There's a clip Let's get something to point at. There's a clip there, there, and there's one over here. You can do that with your fingers. There we are, it's out. And now we can bring in the movement holder. And set it in there nice and tightly. Okay, so we're going to attack the calendar works first, and the next part is to remove what's called the C clip, which is a little brass, well, clip, for want of a better word, in the shape of a C. There's something else about this, but I'll tell you in the rebuild video because it's quite important. What you want to do is you want to look for that gap in the C, which in this instance is here. Okay, you can get your smallest screwdriver and you need to try and lever it up. Now, these will either come up, no problem, or they'll come up and try and jump across the room. I've had one of these jump about 1 metre before. So if you're new, get some Rodico. You can always put a little bit of Rodico on it, and then that way it should contain it. I'm going to take a chance. Okay, another thing, or another tip now, is if you're a little bit nervous with your tweezers, certainly around some of these parts that can be seen, use your Rodico. Rodico is great for picking up little parts, like so. Okay, now that's off, the day wheel will come off quite easily, and all I do is I just pinch it in there, or try to pinch it in there. I'm in the wrong spot. There, like that. It comes straight off. Right, what you now have, or what you can now see, is some of the mechanism. And again, for trying this for the first time, this might scare you a little bit, but don't worry, it's not as bad as it looks. The date wheel is still fastened. It's actually, this is a guard here, there's another guard here, and they're held in by these screws. And once you undo these screws, this wheel will come off along with the guards. And another tip, because I've learnt the hard way, is, this is what I do at least, unscrew and remove each screw one at a time. Don't be tempted to unscrew and leave it, unscrew and leave it, and unscrew and leave it, because when you come to try and take this part, if you slip or move or shake, the screws can fall away and suddenly get lost, and they are very small, and I've learned from experience that it's best to just do one at a time. For instance, there, that one decided to roll away. That one didn't go quite according to plan either. There we are. So the guard is off. The day wheel comes off. Still got this guard over here. Looks like it's held in by 2 screws. You can see there's one here and there's one here. It's only this one that holds the guard plate on. Excuse my fingers. Okay, they're off. So you're left with those parts and the screws. Don't be worried about trying to keep the screws for the individual guards in the same order. They're all the same size for these parts. So you can store them all together how you see fit. Okay, now I'll put those away. It's on with the next bit. So we have this spring here, which is the date wheel spring. It's on a little post here. It doesn't show very well on the camera, but it is. And the spring is just hooked in on its own in the recess there. Now again, to move these, or to remove these, sorry, be a little bit careful because it can be under a bit of tension. Anything under tension wants to move, doesn't it? So all I do is get a bit of pegwood, hold it down with one hand, lever it up with the other. The tension's already gone. See, like that. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just rocking on the pivot that it's on. And then gently try and remove it. Excuse me, but this camera again is exactly where my head should be. Finally. Okay. So what you now can start seeing is this is the hour wheel. This is an intermediate wheel. These are the fingers that drive the date wheel and the day wheel. Makes them click over. This is all part of the quick set, and the minute wheel is just underneath another guard. And then we've got what's called the keyless works, and the keyless works operate all of the hand setting function along with the date setting function via the crown. Obviously I'm sure you would know about the crown. So we'll start by having to take the minute wheel bridge off here. It's held on by that one screw. Again, this all looks a bit complicated, but some of it's the same component. So you're not taking off all of these individual gears that you can see. that's that removed. Then what you have is the set-in lever. Is all this part here, and that will come away freely, like so. Now you can see the minute wheel quite clearly. So we're going to now concentrate on the keyless works. And the first thing is this strange shaped component here, which is the set-in lever spring. The set-in lever being this part here, which is basically what you can operate to move the hands and the day wheels. It's held in by one screw, and again it's on a little pivot. Now I didn't expect that, but as you saw, it jumped out. And these are the little things that you've got to look out for, and that's why it's important to have as much space as possible. Okay, now what we can see here, which is something else that's slightly under tension, is the yoke. And the yoke is holding what's called the clutch in place, and the clutch is basically what operates the mechanisms to change the hands. And again, I'm just going to use my screwdriver to gently go under that one. And out it comes. And then finally the set-in lever is here. This is all one part, and you can see it there moving. And it's held in by, it's got a little stud underneath it. So you just want to, again, get your screwdriver and gently pry that up. Like so. There's the, just on the end there, the pivot that it's on. And now the stem will come out freely. Put your tweezers in and take the clutch out. That's all the keyless works removed. Okay, the next part is to take the wheels off. This is the hour wheel, and the hour wheel just lifts straight off. The minute wheel also comes straight off. The intermediate wheel comes off, and it's made of plastic. Sometimes, depending on the position of the fingers, if the fingers were down here, you may want to move them or remove them. What I didn't say at the start, and I should have said at the start, is that you want to potentially be using the 6309 service sheet that is available on the forum in the file section. It shows you about how to set these back. Another good thing to take a photo so you can actually see this is one part. You take the screw off, there's another part underneath. It's important to get it on in this position, or else the quick set day and date won't work. So I'm just going to unscrew that screw. As you can see, take off the finger. There's the other finger underneath at the end on the gear itself. Now you want to be a bit careful with this because again it's plastic, and plastic can be quite easily damaged. This one seems quite stuck. There we are, and once again something went on a journey. Those are the wheels. The last piece of the puzzle on the calendar side is what's called the cannon pinion. And let's see if we can zoom in a bit there. You can see it here. Okay. The cannon pinion can be, you can buy really fancy tools to get rid of cannon pinions. I have two methods. One method is to use my fingers tightly and pull it, or you can try the hand pulling tool. This we'll try first. It's just like trying to pull the hands off. So I'm just going to line it up and pull it up, and it's got it there, like so. A good quality cannon pinion tool, £65. This, £3. What I will say about a cannon pinion as well is that sometimes they're a bit tighter than that, but if you've got a watch that when you set the time the hands seem really sensitive and loose, it's a good chance it's the cannon pinion. It's either got the wrong oil or too much oil, or it's become loose, and you'd have to crimp it a little bit to get on, or ideally find a donor. What you can see here, incidentally, is a dire shock. So we've got a jewel in a setting, and that's part of the balance shock proof. Now I do take these out and clean them. I'm not going to show you that at this stage, certainly if you're tuning in to try and do this for yourself for the first time. These are very small and not that easy, and I'd prefer you to try and have a few goes before we even look at trying to do something like that. But there we are, that's the calendar side complete.